Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Constein. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to write a compare and contrast essay. Now, this is building on a series of webinars that we have about various writing topics, and we're going to zero in specifically on an assignment that asks that you compare and contrast different elements by explaining how one is or isn't found in different areas. So come along for the ride. A few preliminaries. If you're new to the Online Writing Center, we work with students throughout the writing process. You can make an appointment with us to help understand what an assignment is asking you to do. You can make an appointment for brainstorming on a thesis or figuring out how to organize your paper, or you can have a partial or full draft that you send in for feedback. You can make an appointment on my.acu.edu, go to Resources and select Online Writing Center and just follow the instructions. But once you get to our scheduling system, you'll be asked to choose between two basic types of appointments. Asynchronous appointments, meaning not in real time. For an asynchronous appointment, you schedule a time, you upload a copy of your course paper or whatever writing materials you'd like us to look at by the time the appointment slot comes around, and we look at it and we send you feedback generally within 24 hours. A little bit faster if it's a Sunday or Monday, and perhaps a little bit longer if it's on a major holiday weekend. Either way, we'll make sure to get that feedback in time for you to look at it before you have to submit your revised paper and give you enough time to integrate that feedback and respond to it. You can also sign up for a real-time phone or Zoom appointment, which is just what it sounds like. You'd have a conversation by phone about your draft or questions about your draft, or be looking at a screen shared in Zoom as we're having this conversation. And what you should select depends on what you want and what you feel will be the best way to get that at any given time. So for a lot of students, that's going to be the Zoom appointment because they're visual learners, but we have people who are doing other tasks and want to imagine it in their head, or they just work better without that visual distraction. So either is fine. You let us know what you would prefer. And often people will switch back at different times in the appointment, and they'll get to a point and say, it would be really helpful to see that. Could we go to Zoom and do just that? So after you've scheduled an appointment, you're going to want to upload your draft to Canvas by the time your appointment would start. If it's running late, you're like, I need an extra 10 minutes to get this done. That's fine. Just send us an email saying, hey, it's going to be a little late. Sorry. And that's not a problem at all. If it's going to be like 2 days late, then you might want another appointment. But generally, it's not a problem for us to accommodate someone being slightly late on a draft, just like in a physical online writing center. Sometimes you just walk through the door a little bit late because you were held up in a meeting, lecture went long, parking, etc. That's not a problem. So if you are looking for a particular program that you're in and for all the courses that tie in and wondering, do we have something about that? Something related to your classes? Well, if you go to our Writing Webinars page, you'll see at the top there's a sorted calendar list of what's being offered this semester. At the bottom, there's a big alphabetical list. And in the middle, we have this tabbed guide where you can select a particular program like FAMO and see all the assignments that we have that tie in with that particular program. And so it's sorted by the program and then by ascending course number and then by week within that. So, for example, if I was in FAMO, I could look down and say, okay, FAMO 262, do they have something for week 4? Yes, awesome. Let me add that to my calendar to watch when it comes to week 4. So just a little information about that. Some other resources you might be interested in. We have an APA course paper template that you'll see me talking about later, a YouTube channel for watching our videos on the go. We also explore various topics in our blog. So we're going to be talking about 3 things today. We're going to be looking at some principles of argument analysis, in particular compare-contrast. We're going to look at an assignment that asks you to do comparison and contrasting, and we'll talk about how to manifest that to take those instructions and convert them into outlining and drafting instructions. So let's talk about some principles of argument analysis first. So first off, when you are analyzing someone's argument, you want to make sure that you're following a clear and logical order. Ask yourself, who is saying this? What are they saying? Why are they saying it? And how are they saying it? And this works when you're doing more than just analyzing two different speakers. You can also use this basic approach when you're analyzing the ways that someone is saying something, and to compare and contrast that, or to look at an essay and its different parts, or different chapters in a novel, or sections of a TV episode. And that's also because we're involving comparative context within a larger work sometimes. When were they saying it? Or when was this introduced? And how was this regarded? By whom? That could be you as the whom, or it could be someone else, or a framework or a metric that you're using. How do they regard themselves? What does this mean to them? Now, example, let's say we're taking Christian evangelists as our who, and they're advocating converting to Christianity. Okay. Why? To spread the gospel. Okay. So we see clear reason here. Now, the how, if we're talking in the certain portion of Christianity, when they're using convert or die, it may have been motivated with the goal of saving souls, but, we don't do that anymore. In fact, we do not support that. But if we're looking at, say, Christian evangelists also looking to convert to Christianity, spread the gospel, and they're using the model of modern missions, which is to model the good that you are doing from your Christian beliefs to what you're living out in your Christian life, and expect, encourage, hope that people will ask you questions and come to faith through your example. Well, that is something where looking at even though there are these parallels in Numbers 1 through 3, the how is really, really important. And, that it's not entirely that there's just one model of modern missions, but the predominant thing. And there are so many differences that you might zero down in on within that if you're comparing and contrasting different things. There was a case a couple years ago with the Andaman Islands, which are southeast of India, and a missionary wanted to contact one of the indigenous tribes that live on this island, and he was counseled not to go, and he believed in the mission, and unfortunately it ended in his death. And if you look at the how, he was persevering despite the counsel of many people saying not to do that. And how would you contrast that with another approach to missionary activity, including what you might be doing yourself? So this is just an illustrative example of how, when you are following these principles, you can use these questions to identify similarities and then focus in on those differences. Now, there's a lot that's being critiqued of his approach, including safety grounds, whether he's prepared for it, etc. The hurt and loss that happened to his family, potential danger to the natives, and those are all things that you could write about, that are highlighted more by seeing, okay, here's what was similar with the general thrust of modern missions, and here's where it diverted from that. Now, if we were to be writing up, again, this example of number 1, we might say, okay, Christian evangelists have not always converted people to Christianity in ways that most would consider acceptable today. And then take the other details and bring them in. For example, during the Middle Ages, saving souls was considered so important that during the Baltic Crusades, people were forced to convert to Christianity on pain of death. Not something we do anymore, not something I recommend, not something we think was a great moment. But that's where the next one comes. How is this regarded? Well, today's Christians recognize this as barbaric. This has been rejected by missionaries and the organized churches. And then we look at the how did they regard themselves. Well, however, this was a common practice amongst many religions of the time, with conquered peoples forced to submit to political and religious conversion. And we unfortunately don't have to look too far in our current times to find recent examples of people trying to do that, which we do not like, and so we can look back at history and say, yeah, that was not great. So what you want to take from this is that compare and contrast is a major strategy that highlights the similarities and the differences. And so whether you're looking at pieces of literature, argument, or how things align with a way of classifying things like nature or nurture, to look at what do these instances, groups, examples, or details have in common, and are there things where there's overlap, but perhaps overlap that's interpreted differently? How do they diverge? And is this something where the groups or the approaches actively accept or actively dispute something, or to dispute the importance or significance of different details? What evidence is there to support one categorization, like that this is example of nature, or this is evidence towards the importance of nurture, or this is nurture manifesting versus nature? And then also, what evidence is there to not support an alternate categorization? And a lot of this can follow some formulas where it's, okay, this is an example of this happening because of these reasons. It is not an example of this other thing because of that. And that's a great way to start with formulating your argument, because you're assembling the evidence for and against. You might do a list and find, oh, hey, there's a lot more evidence for this than there is against it, or for this other approach. At this point, let's turn the page and look at this assignment from FAMO 452. This is the week 4 assignment, Is it nature, nurture, or both? Coming from Parenting and Family Skills. We start with a preamble. One of the stated learning outcomes for Chapter 8 is demonstrate how the interplay of nature and nurture impacts a young child's development. Some of the material in the chapter may be more challenging to categorize as nature or nurture, but look for a rationale supporting its relationship to the larger term. So it's saying, hey, find what the evidence is and make an argument for that, the rationale. A general question concerning nature is, what happens to the development of the child if there are missing components on the nature side? Another question reflects the idea that superior nurturing can overcome deficiencies and under-nurturing can harm the child. Now we move into the assignment instructions proper. In this assignment, you will be defining nature and nurture. Okay, so we need to have some sentences or paragraphs on that first. And then categorizing the material in Chapter 8 according to whether it fits under nature or nurture. Your written assignment should follow the outline below. Nature, this is where you describe the basic definition of nature, biological contributions, and the impact of these on child development. And so this is your discussion of your chosen sections from the text. So you're going to be enumerating, no, this section is nature, and then giving us reasons why, and then doing the same thing with nurture. So you will be defining each of these and then discussing the examples that fit into that. And if there's some sections where you're like, well, it could be either or it's mixed, well, talk about that. And give us the evidence for and against. Tell us how this fits together. And it should be between 1,300 and 1,500 words. If you're wondering how long that is, 1,300 is just a little bit over 5 double-spaced pages, and 1,500 words is about 6 double-spaced pages in APA style, meaning 12-point font, 1-inch margins, double spacing, and basically using our APA course paper template. And that's roughly 5 to 6 pages of content, so we're not counting the title page, we're not counting the references page. And if we look at the rubric here, we see that the points here, we have 10% going to, is it the right length, and generally following APA style. We have, about 9% going to that. We've got about another 9% going to, is it well written, punctuation, proofread, etc. Notice that another 9%, the sentences, fluent sentences with few if any structural weaknesses, this is looking at the quality of your argument. And same thing with the organization of paragraphs. So together these are looking at on the sentence and paragraph level, is it clear how everything fits together? is the argument connected in smaller and larger parts? And, are you creating a more complex argument from these things? And then the rest of the credit, about roughly around 60% goes to the are you doing the things? Are you talking about nature and nurture in this chapter? Are you defining the terms appropriately and providing supporting evidence for your arguments? So there's definitely a concern with the quality of your writing, so make sure to proofread it. If necessary, divide larger paragraphs so that the arguments are clearer, things like that, so that's a nice coherent paper. So how would you go through the outlining and drafting stage here? Well, we want to start with the instructions here because we're told to have an introduction to redefine nature and nurture, and then that there'll be a dedicated section for each that will have a broader definition. So looking at this, if we have 5 to 6 pages, each of these sections on nature and nurture is going to be at least 2 pages each. So we want to really be looking at how you might divide the content there. And so you'll probably start with the bulleted list and then see, well, okay, here's some examples that cluster together and put those together. And here's another cluster. And here's some things that don't fit neatly into either category. And so perhaps you'll have another paragraph or 2 about those examples. Now, looking at this, purpose fully supported with details arranged logically and effectively. So what this would not mean is to have one giant paragraph for nurture, one giant paragraph for nature, because that would be logically for organization, but not effective. That's too much information to have multi-page paragraphs. In general, for this sort of writing, especially for a 400 level course, you want to have your information organized into paragraphs of around 5 to 7 sentences each. And that may involve breaking up groups of related ideas to deal with them in turn and then move on to the next one. And so if you watch the Beyond Summary or Synthesis and Consequences webinars, those go into more detail about the paragraph organization and how to create an effective argument following the no tears plan, where you lay out what you're claiming in the topic sentence, what the focus of the paragraph is going to be, give us evidence or argumentation. Oh, these sections are talking about the importance of the nurture approach. Give us some examples. Well, it says blah, blah, blah. Analyze that. Okay. And repeat that as necessary. Give us more evidence and analysis, not just one little bit, multiple things to make this point that the section falls into this and how or why that is important. And that how or why that's important is a synthesis step here where you're talking about what this means when put together. It might be helpful to know that synthesis can happen on multiple levels. You can have synthesis of the information in a paragraph or be synthesizing the information from multiple paragraphs. And so that bringing things together is a great way to end your section on nature and a great way to end your section on nurturing. Same thing also when you're talking about things that don't fit easily into either category, because it's a way of saying, okay, well, we talked about how this doesn't fit, and what does that mean? Is it something that applies to both or only to one, or we dismiss these things because there's so much in favor of the other? That's going to be part of your synthesis and conclusion. Now, we've included a couple more slides if some of the things that I'm saying are new to you, but we're not going to talk about these in detail. Instead, I'm going to focus in on talking about how to format that in APA style. Because when you're analyzing this, you're not just reading the textbook, you're also applying other things here. And it could be something from elsewhere in the textbook. It could be something from an outside resource. But if you're referring to it, tell us, okay, whose perspective or whose classification? According to this author, in alignment with the Chike 2014, this is X. Or according to the criteria laid out by this author writing on this date, this is one of the 7 things that are examples of this other thing, for example. And you can use that to support your argument more clearly and show you're not just making this classification, you're making the classification according to a set of laid out criteria. Doing this helps connect the dots between your different pieces of evidence and show how it has an importance beyond this idle thing. Oh, well, they mentioned this, that, and the other thing. Because we have these things, we see how this is very important according to this metric. Now, we don't have time to go into more detail there, but I want to again draw your attention to this is touching on topics that we have discussed in other webinars in great detail. So if the general concepts for paragraph organization and creating this evidence-based argument are new to you, I strongly encourage watching our Beyond Summary, Adding Analysis and Synthesis webinar and our Synthesis and Consequences webinar. That's all we have for today. So if you have any questions or looking for recommendations and other resources, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can sign up for an appointment by going to my.acu.edu and selecting from the resources drop-down Online Writing Center and just follow the instructions. And you can also visit the Online Writing Center website directly. That's it. Have a good night.